Shabbat Shalom, Lane and Stephanie. I hope you both are staying warm in cold Indiana. Shabbat Shalom, David and Tina. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Agudath Israel Etz Ahayem Synagogue here in Montgomery, Alabama. I am Rabbi Scott Kramer, if you haven't figured that out by now, after so many years. And our Chazan Charles is here, and so is Elaine. Shabbat Shalom to all of you. We are praying this evening out of Siddur Lev Shalem. I hope everyone has had a relatively good and safe and healthy week. I look forward to Shabbat. Like last week, Irene was at her conference, so this week she's back, and it's just nice to be able to bring in Shabbat with Shabbat Shalom, Stevie. And just nice to be able to celebrate Shabbat with her again. And, of course, and our two dogs. So we will start this evening. I'll stop babbling. We'll begin on page 5 with Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei Amlachim Kadosh Baruch Hu, Boachem L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei Amlachim Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Baruch Hu Nile Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei Amlachim Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Seitchem l'shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei Amlachim Hakadosh Baruch Hu. We continue, page 11. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena ladunai, lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena ladunai. Nariya, nariya, letzur yishenu, nekad mafana betoda. Nariya, nariya, letzur yishenu, bizmirot nariya lo. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena ladunai. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena ladunai. Nariya, nariya, letzor yishenu, nekad mafana betoda. Nariya, nariya, letzor yishenu, bizmirot nariya lo. Please join me in the English. Let us go and sing to Adonai. Let us trumpet praise to our protector. Filled with thanks, let us greet God, raising our voice in song. Great is Adonai, a greater sovereign than all other deities. God's hands formed the earth's deep. Mountain crests too are God's work. The sea is God's, for God made it. Dry land was fashioned by God's hands. Come then, let us bow and kneel. Let us bend our knees in the presence of Adonai who formed us. For Adonai is our God, and we are God's flock, sheep in God's caring hands. If only you would listen today to God's voice and not become hard-hearted like the people at Merivah, like that time at Massah in the desert when your ancestors tried me and tested me, though they had seen what I had wrought. For 40 years I was troubled by that generation, and I said, these are a people whose hearts have gone astray. They do not know my way, so in anger I swore they would not enter my rest. 40 shana kut bedor va'omar am to'eh levavem v'hem lo yad derachai asher nishbati v'yapi im yavaon el menuchati. Page 13, Psalm 96. Ashiru ladonai shir chadash, shiru ladonai kol haaretz, shiru ladonai baruch shemo, basru meyom leyom yeshuato, sapru vagoyim kevodo, bechol ha'amim nifliotav, ki gadol Adonai, o mehulal miyod. No ra'u al ko Elohim lai 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 kiko Elohe ha'amim elilim v'Adonai shamayim asa od v'hadar lefanav Oz v'tiferet b'mikdasho havu ladonai mishpachot amim havu ladonai kavod v'oz havu ladonai ke'evod shemo seu mincha uvahu l'chatzorot av lai lai la shtachavu ladonai behadrat kodesh chilu mipanav kol haaretz imrum vagoyim Adonai malach avtikum tevel balatimot yadina amim b'meishaim yismechu hashamayim v'tagil haaretz ayir hamayamu melo yalo sadai v'chol asher bo lai 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 az yiranenu kol hatziyar lifnei Adonai kiva lishpot haaretz yishpot tevel b'tzedek v'yamim b'emunato yalai la lai la yai la 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 lai yai lai 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 la lai la lai la lai yai lai 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 Yai lai 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 yai lai lai lai. We continue page 15, Psalm 97. Adonai reigns, let the earth be glad, the many distant lands rejoice. Clouds and thick darkness surround the divine, righteousness and justice secure God's throne. Fire goes before God, consuming besiegers round about. Flashes of lightning illumine the land. The earth watches and trembles. Mountains melt like wax at the approach of Adonai, at the approach of the Master of all the earth. The heavens tell of God's righteousness, and all the nations see God's glory. Worshippers of idols be shamed for praising false gods. All that is deemed supreme bow before God. Zion hears of it and rejoices. The cities of Judah exult. As you, Adonai, pass judgment. You, Adonai, are above all that is earthly, exalted over all that is worshipped as divine. Those who love Adonai hate evil. God protects the lives of the faithful, saving them from the hands of the sinful. Light is sown for the righteous and joy for the upright. Rejoice in Adonai, you righteous people, and thank God as you pronounce the divine holy name. Or zarula tzadik will Yisrael have simcha, simchu tzadikim badunai, v'hoduhu lezecher kadesho. Page 17. Mizmor shiru ladonai shir chadash, ki niflot asa, Hoshia lo yemino, Uzaro wako chuadia, Adonai Yeshuato, Leeno goyim gilat sid kato, Zachar chastav emunato, Leveit Yisrael, Ra'u Cholav Se'aretz, Et Yeshuat Eloheinu, Horiu Ladonai Kol Haaretz, Pitzchu Veranenu V'zameru, Zamru Ladonai Bechinar, Bechinar V'kol Zimera, Bechatzot Rod V'kol Shofar, Horiu Lifnei HaMelech Adonai, Yiram Hayam U'Meloho, Tevel V'yoshveva, Neharot Yimcha Uchaf, Yachad Arim Yiranenu, Lifnei Adonai Kiva, Lishbot Aretz, Yishbot Tevel B'tzedek, Ve'amim B'meisharim, Yalai, Yalai, la 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 la, Yalai, la 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 la, Yalai, la 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 la, Yalai, la 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 la, Yalai, la 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 la, Yalai, la 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 la, Yalai, la 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 la, Yalai, la 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 la. We continue, page 19, Psalm 99. Adonai reigns, nations tremble, the one enthroned amidst the cherubim makes the world quake. Adonai is great in Zion above all nations. They shall acknowledge your name, saying, Great, all-inspiring Holy One. A sovereign strength lies in the love of justice, and you forged the paths of truth, judging Jacob righteously and justly. Exalt Adonai our God, bow down before God, the Holy One. Moses and Aaron among God's priests, and Samuel among those who called upon the divine name, called to you, and you answered them. You spoke to them from amidst the cloud. They kept your covenant and the law you gave them. You answered them, Adonai, our God. You are a forgiving God to them, even as you punish them for their transgressions. Exalt Adonai, our God, and bow down at God's holy mountain, for Adonai, our God, is holy. Romemu Adonai Elonu ishtachavu lahar kadosho, ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. We rise, if you're able, page 21, Psalm 29. Mizmor leDavid, havu l'Adonai b'nei Elim, havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz, havu l'Adonai kavod shemo, ishtachavu l'Adonai behadrat kodesh, kol Adonai alamayim, el hakavod hirim, Adonai amayim, amayim rabim, kol Adonai ba'koach, kol Adonai behadar, kol Adonai shover arazim, v'shaber Adonai et hauzei alvanon, v'yarkidem kemo egel Levanon v'Sirion, kemo ven re'emim. Kol Adonai chotzev lavotesh, kol Adonai yachil midbar, yachil Adonai midbar kadesh, kol Adonai yecholel ayalot, vayechasam yarod, uvehechalo kulo omer kavod, kulo omer kavod. Adonai lamabul yashav, vayeshev Adonai melech leolam, Adonai oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom, et amo v'shalom. You may be seated. We continue, page 23. Lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat nikabela, lecha dodi lekrat kala pnei Shabbat nikabela, shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, hishmiyanu elam yuchad, Adonai echad, u'shemo echad, l'shemo tiferet v'liti l'alecha, dodi likrat kala, P'nei Shabbat nikabila, likrat Shabbat, lechu v'nilcha, ki mikora beracha, merosh mikedem nesucha, sov maseh b'machshvat chila lecha, dodi likrat kala, P'nei Shabbat nikabila, mikdash melech ir melucha, Kumitzi mitocha hafecha ravlach shevet b'yem hekabacha v'yachamo alaychem la lecha dodi lekrat kala p'nei Shabbat nikabila hitnari me'afar kumi leave shevi deiti fartechami ayad ben yishai beit alachmi korvel anav shigei Allah Lecha dodi likrat kala p'nei Shabbat nikabila hitoreri kiva ore kumi ori shir daberi kivod Adonai alayich nigla lecha dodi likrat kala P'nei Shabbat nikabila lecha dodi likrat kala P'nei Shabbat nikabila lo tevoshi v'lo tikami ma tishtochachi u'ma tehemi bach yechasu ani eyami v'nivneta ir al tila lecha dodi likrat kala P'nei Shabbat nikabila v'hayulam sisa shahu esayich v'rachakoko mivalayich yasis alayich Elohayich kimchaz chatana al kala lecha dodi likrat kala P'nei Shabbat nikabila yamin usmo tifrotzi v'yet Adonai taritzi ayad ben yitzarfi nismecha v'nagila lecha dodi likrat kala P'nei Shabbat nikabila. We rise if you are able. We face towards the west, towards the entrance of our synagogue, and so we can greet the Shabbat bride. Bo'i v'shalom ateret bala gam besimcha uvetzala tochem unei am segula bo'i chala lecha dodi likrat kala P'nei Shabbat nikabila. You may be seated. We continue page 27 with Psalm 92. A psalm, the song of the day of Shabbat. It is good to thank you, Adonai, and sing to your name most high, to proclaim your love at daybreak, your faithfulness each night. Finger the lute, pluck the harp, let the sound of the lyre rise up. You gladden me with your deeds, Adonai, and I shall sing of your handiwork. How wonderful are your works, Adonai, how subtle your designs. The arrogant do not understand. The fool does not comprehend this. The wicked flourish like grass, and every evildoer blossoms, only to be destroyed forever. But you, Adonai, are exalted for all time. Surely your enemies, Adonai, surely your enemies will perish. All who commit evil will be scattered. As a wild bull raises up its horn, you raised my head high and anointed it with fresh oil. As my enemies gather against me, my gaze remains steady, and my ears listen and hear. The righteous flourish like the date palm, thrive like a cedar in Lebanon, planted in the house of Adonai. They flourish in our God's courtyards. In old age they remain fruitful, still fresh and bountiful, proclaiming, Adonai is upright, my rock, in whom there is no flaw. Tzadik tamar yifrach ki erez balvanan yizke shetulim beveit Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenuvun beseva tishenim verhananim yeyu le'agid ki yashar Adonai tzuri v'lo avlatobo. Page 29, Psalm 93. Adonai is sovereign, robed in splendor, girded in strength. The earth stands firm, not to be dislodged. From earliest time you were enthroned, you are eternal. The rivers rise up, Adonai. The rivers raise up their roar. The rivers raise up their waves. Above the roar of the vast sea and the majestic breakers of the ocean, Adonai stands supreme in the heavens. In your house, beautiful in its holiness, your testimonies endure, Adonai, for all time. Shabbat Shalom. This is a chance for us to take a collective breath and wish each other Shabbat Shalom. I look forward to this evening so much every week so that I can be here with you and with you. And I'm just so grateful that I'm able to be here with you. In this week's Torah portion, in the second half of the second Aliyah, I guess, it says the following. This comes from Ki Tisa, Exodus chapter 30, verse 17. It says, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, make a laver of copper and a stand of copper for it, for washing, and place it between the tent of meeting and the altar. Put water in it, and let Aaron and his sons wash their hands and feet from it. When they enter the tent of meeting, they shall wash with water, that they may not die. Or when they approach the altar to serve, to turn into smoke a gift to the Lord, they shall wash their hands and feet, that they may not die. It shall be a law for all time for them, for him and his offspring throughout the ages. Not a remarkable set of verses, but it does make me think about the place of water and washing in our rituals. This particular set of verses clearly says that the priests had to wash their hands and feet before they offered sacrifices. And it's to be a law for all generations down to our generation. How is this observed in Judaism even today? We don't offer sacrifices, but do the priests, do the Kohanim that exist in every congregation, do they wash their hands and feet at any point? Yeah, they do, actually. Maybe not in a Reformed or conservative congregation, but in an Orthodox congregation, like I grew up in, during the high holidays at Musaf, right before the Birkat Kohanim, the blessings of the priests, or the priestly blessing is probably the best way to say that. The priests in the congregation would all have their hands and feet washed by a Levite. And I remember distinctly my cousin got very excited. He was not a Levite, but he knew that there were more Kohanim in the congregation than Levites. And sometimes there was no Levi there. And according to the law, if there are no Levies there, then any firstborn is allowed to wash the priest's hands and feet. And of course, my cousin was a firstborn, and he would get out of the starting blocks and he would rush to the place where this was done. And what did the priests do after they had their hands and feet washed? They approached the bima, they came up and faced the congregation, and they pronounced each word of the priestly blessing according to an ancient tune. They would raise their talit high over their heads and say this blessing. And by the way, if for all you Star Trek fans, this is where Leonard Nimoy actually got the sign, his Vulcan sign, because he would go under his father's talit on the high holidays, and he watched what his father did, and he saw him raise his talit in this gesture. And so when it came time for Leonard Nimoy to make his character somewhat unique, he used that symbol. When else do we wash in Judaism? That might not be something that we're all that familiar with. That's called duchenin, by the way. But we do wash our hands in Judaism, all of us, on Friday nights as we sit down to a Shabbat meal. We wash our hands before we eat challah in a traditional way. And we also wash our hands, if you all can remember attending a Seder all that long time ago, we actually wash our hands twice at the Seder. Once before we eat karpas at the beginning, and then again right before we eat matzah. So washing is buried within our tradition. We wash, we even use the waters of a mikvah, of living waters, to purify us for before the high holidays. A convert to Judaism will dunk themselves in the waters of a mikvah. So washing definitely has its place in Judaism. There's a story I heard recently, not in this context, but I'm going to use it in this context. There was a man by the name of Ignaz Semmelweis. He was a Hungarian physician. He was born July 1st, 1818. In 1846, Semmelweis was placed in charge of an obstetric clinic at the Vienna General Hospital and was trying to solve the enigma of puerperal, or childbirth fever. Over 13% of his clinic's maternal parents died from postnatal complications. Puzzlingly, in the other Vienna hospital obstetrical clinic, the one that wealthy people didn't go to, this is the one that poor people went to, set up for the teaching of midwives, the mortality rate was only 2%. Semmelweis's clinic taught not with midwives, but medical students. He did all sorts of experiments to find the reason for the difference in mortality rate, without success. Then in 1847, a physician colleague of Semmelweis was nicked with a scalpel while dissecting a cadaver. he rapidly developed an infection and died. Interestingly, his symptoms were similar to those of women who died of childbirth fever, which was in fact a horrible death. It occurred to Semmelweis that perhaps some cadaver material entered the wound and caused the infection and death. Semmelweis connected the dots. Medical students regularly dissected cadavers, and often they came directly to the obstetrics ward from the dissection room to deliver babies. They did not wash their hands because no one knew about germs in 1847, and no one understood the need for surgical hygiene. Midwives did no dissections, and so they were not bringing infectious material to their patients. Could childbed fever be prevented by removing the contaminants from the medical students' hands? So Semmelweis instituted a cleansing procedure required of all students and staff at his clinic, whereby they had to wash their hands in a solution of chlorinated lime before assisting maternal patients. Within a short time, the mortality rate dropped from 13% to 2% and was now the same in both clinics. But here's the rest of the story. Semmelweis tried to convince others of the value of disinfection and the importance of hand washing, but no one listened. Why didn't they listen? Perhaps Semmelweis had Jews in his background, and of course in the 1850s, anti-Semitism was on the rise. Hand washing was not generally adopted. Women continued to die of childbed fever, and Semmelweis eventually went crazy. He was committed to an asylum where he died in 1865 at age 47. Only when Louis Pasteur's germ theory of disease worked out between 1861 and 1864 was adopted did physicians realize that hand washing removes the germs that cause disease. And then Semmelweis was hailed posthumously as a hero. Now, I heard this story in a different context, but I thought because Semmelweis, again, some of his ancestors were Jewish, he maybe had done hand washing as part of his own ritual, his own religious ritual. Maybe he celebrated Shabbat, maybe he ate challah. Lights are going off. Maybe he understood that there was another reason for this hand washing. And of course, our hand washing, nowhere does it say it has anything to do with health, though it did say if the priests didn't wash their hands, they would die. I think that was a little bit too much to actually assume that someone would do that. But here is hand washing is so important. I understood that during the Black Plague in the Middle Ages, Jews in their towns died at a less rate than their neighbors. And of course, their Christian neighbors blame the Jews for the Black Plague. Of course, they didn't have anything to do with it. But maybe it had something to do with their hand washing. Don't know. So there are a lot of things in Judaism that we do. They really we don't do them because they are for our health. We do them for our spiritual health. We wash hands so that we can be spiritually cleansed for that which follows. We elevate the challah right before we eat it, and we do that just like the priests did in ancient times by washing our hands. Not because we're going to transmit something from the challah to ourselves and other people, but because that is how we become spiritually clean. The priests approaching the bimah to bless the congregation, there was no contact between the priests and the people, but they had to approach the bimah in ritual purity. So everything in Judaism doesn't have to have a physical reason for us doing them. Sometimes it's enough that we need to be spiritually involved in what we do in Judaism. Okay? And I just thought that was an interesting story to actually, we find out that something we do maybe has something to do with our health. But according to the Torah, it does not. So go home tonight and warm up your challah and wash your hands before then. It makes the whole evening more than just eating bread. It takes the bread and makes it into challah, which is heavenly. And I look forward to that, going home and celebrating Shabbat with Irene. So Shabbat Shalom. And we will continue our service, page 39a. Please rise for the Baruch Hu, the call to worship. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai Vorach, Leolam Voed. You may be seated. Baruch et Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro. Mahavir Yom Mevi Laila Mavdio Ben Yom Ben Laila Adonai Tzavot Shemo El Chai V'Kayim Tamidim Lo Chaleinu Lamvoed Baruch Atah Adonai Hamari V'Aravim. Page 40. Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael Amchavta Torah Mitzvot Chukim Mishpatim Otanu Limadeta Al Kein Adonai Eloheinu B'shachveinu v'kumeinu Nasiach bechukecha V'nismach b'divrei Toratecha U'v'mitzvotecha Le'olam vohed Ki em chayenu V'orech yameinu Uvahem nege yomam v'layla v'yavatchates mimenu la'olamim Baruch Adonai ohev amo Yisrael Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha v'chol nafshecha v'chol me'odecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinanatam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha v'derech uv'shachpecha v'kumecha קשרתם נאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך, ובשעריך, והיה אם שמות תשמעו אל מצותי. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת להם ויעשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורתם ונתנו על ציצית הכנף בתיל תכלת והיה לכם לציצית וראיתם אותו וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם ולא תטו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם למען תסגרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם page 43A ואמונה כזאת וקיים. page 44 ומלכותו ברצון קיבל עליהם משה ובני ישראל כנשירה בשמחה רבה ויאמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדור בקודש נורא תהילות אוסף אלה מלכותך ובניך בו קיים לפני משה זה לי אנו ויאמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כי ודע אדוני את יעקב וגלת מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל page 45 השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו ושמוצאתנו ואין לחיים ושלומי אתה ויד עולם ופרוס לנו סוכת שלומך ברוך אתה אדוני הבועט סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים we rise page 46 ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם אותי לעולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם וביום השביעי שבת וינפש שבת וינפש שבת וינפש ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם. We continue with the silent Amidah for Friday night, pages 47 through 52. Shalom Yimrama, Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, V'yokol Yisrael, V'mahu, Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, V'yokol Yisrael, Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael. We rise, page 56, as the ark is open for Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol latet gdula liotzer bereshit shalo asanu k'goyei haratzot velo samanu k'mishmachot ha'adama shalo sam chelkeinu kahem v'gor aleinu k'chol hamonam v'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim l'fnei melech Malchei Hamlachim Hakadosh Baruch Hu Shehu Notei Shamayim V'Yosed Haaretz U'Moshav Yikara B'Shamayim Imau U'Shchinatu Zo B'Gavei Meromim Hu Eloheinu Einod Emet Malkeinu Evazulato Kakatu B'Torato V'yadat Ahayem V'hashivota Elevavecha Ki Adonai Hu Elohim B'Shamayim Nimal V'yal ha'aretz Mi Tachat Einod Al Kenik V'lech Adonai Eloheinu Li'rab Meher B'tivecha Tuzacha. Kagadu b'toratech Adonai mloch le'lam voed v'nehemar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol ha'aretz bayom ma'u yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. You may be seated. This week we will observe yahrzeits for Roy Emanuel, Miriam Reiner, Louis Byrne, Rose Butler, Fanny G. Goldfield, Rebecca Rich, Matilda D. Cohen, Helen Weisberger, Faye Allen, Abraham Stamm, Morris R. Franco, Yale Friedlander, Rebecca Center, Jerry Finkelstein, Philip Plotka, Harvey Taffet, Beulah of Zaradel, and Victor Raphael Saracen. Those observing yahrzeit and those who mourn, please rise and join me, page 58, for the Kaddish Tome, the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shmei Rabbah, B'yama divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon of yomechon, v'chayedecho beit Yisrael, ba'agalav izman kariv yimaru amen, yehi shmei rabam nevarach le'elam olmei maya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitchomam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei kudisham barichu, le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata da'amiran v'yomah v'yimaru amen, yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimaru amen. Oseh shalom v'imramav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimaru amen. You may be seated. Shabbat shalom once again. Thank you all for joining me, for joining us for Kabbalat Shabbat. I will be back tomorrow morning, 9:30, for continuation of Shabbat. And I will be here, actually we'll be on Zoom tomorrow evening as we celebrate the end of Shabbat together with the Alabama Community Virtual Havdalah. If you did not get the link, please email me and I'll make sure you get that link before we start at 7 p.m. Tomorrow evening. On Tuesdays at 1, we just started a adult learning. We are studying Pirkei Avot, a book that is just chock full of aphorisms, quotes from our sages, things to live by, like if not now, when. So for an hour, we study one or two of the Mishna'ot in Pirkei Avot. If you would like to attend, it's on Zoom, it's only online. Please email me and I will get that link to you. That's it. You can email me at ravmalki@gmail.com. That's RAVMALKI at gmail.com, and you can join us. We had a nice attendance last week. And it's nice to engage with our holy texts and find out what we all think about this. And I think, and everybody was mailed Purim is coming up on March 16th, and every year we participate in Mashloach Manot. Our sisterhood prepares goodie bags for each of us, and there's a form to fill out. I think it was mailed to each of us. I think it'll be in our monthly bulletin that comes out in March as well. So if you would like to participate in that, don't forget to fill out the form and send your check in to support our sisterhood. With that, we will go ahead and conclude our service, page 211, with Adon Olam. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra li'eit nasa v'chefso kol azai melech shemo nikra azai melech shemo nikra v'yachare kichlot hakol leva hado yimloch nora v'hu haya v'hu ove v'hu yeh b'tifara v'hu yeh b'tifara v'hu echad v'yein sheni laham shelo lehachbira beli reshi beli tachlit v'lo ha'oz v'hamisra v'lo ha'oz v'hamisra v'hu eli v'chai go'eli v'tzur chevli b'yetzara v'hu nisi umanosli menat kosi b'yom mekra menat kosi b'yom mekra b'yado afkid ruchi b'yet ishan v'yaira v'immeruchi kiviyati Adonai li v'lo ira Adonai li v'lo ira. Shabbat shalom, just in time for me to lose my voice.